Welcome back. Happy holidays, everybody. I hope you guys had a good time. Okay, so I'm super behind, but there's no due date for Advent of Codes, so we're just gonna keep going until they are all done. Um, I just completed day 9. This was the most frustrating and annoying challenge of them all. Well, out of all the 9 I've done, 8 I've done. My goodness, bruh, it was so bad. So my first attempt, look how many files I created. Okay, my first attempt. I was let's go over the prompt first. So you have rope. Um, essentially, you have a rope. In the first part, it's a head and a tail. The tail essentially has to be right behind the head in the 4 directions. So if you see this example, they always have to be touching. If it's either diagonally or up, down, left, right, they always have to be touching. The mistake I made was I forgot for part 2. I missed this. It can move diagonally for part 2, but part 1 you don't really see it because there's a little trick you could do for part 1, but it will fuck up. It will mess up like part 2 because you essentially have to start all over because you can't translate the logic from part 1 to part 2. So I'm assuming you're following along, so you guys know kind of like what this problem has, what you have to do for it. So essentially giving directions right, up, left, down, and the head has to follow that direction, and you're keeping track of how many unique positions that tail visits. Here's your example. For the first example, there are 13 positions that the tail visited at least once. And for my attempt, I literally did not even, it took me so long to figure out. I think I started working this, I just looked at it on Thursday. No, probably Wednesday night. And I was just glimpsing through it. And so I read the directions. For some reason, I thought we were working with grids. And you can see I upped my boundaries to 10,000 because it kept running out of bounds with the actual input I was given. But the highest one is 20, and then I see 30 somewhere. So I was super confused with the problem because I assumed we were working with a grid, but then I went back and we're not giving any bounds or anything. It's just points. So you could assume the grid is what, infinite. You just have to keep track of the points. So then after I figured that out, I just reset, and I tried doing object-oriented stuff just because I'm still learning Ruby, and I'm maybe I'll make a class, add class too, but I didn't even end up using it. Same thing, read. I made it's adjacent method. So if it's adjacent in any of the quad areas, then this returns true. I ended up not using this on the second part. We'll talk over it when we get there. So the main function, this was I think I might have overridden this for part 2, but essentially the trick here is I think I accidentally, is it this one? I think I accidentally overrid my original code here. But essentially what I was doing for part 1 was keeping track of the latest head location. And then if they were not adjacent anymore, I had all the previous head locations in an array, and then I would pop the latest head location and then that would be the tail location. So then I added them all to a list, and then I was able to get the unique length. So that's a shortcut you could take for part 1. But as I stated before, it kind of messes up with how you work with part 2, because that does not apply, because the grid moves like, let me see, the grid moves in part 2. There's different like rope positions are possible than in part 1, because now you're working with a rope with a length of 10. So I think it was kind of confusing with the problem not specifying like the between steps. So for example, if you see right 5, this one moves 5 times to the right, so that one's pretty straightforward. But once you're moving 8, as soon as you move up 1, let me see, let's bring up paint. Let's see if I could do it. So I think it's 5, 6, 7, 8. I have it backwards. That is my fault. So as soon as H is like here, and then there's the dots are empty spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and then 6, 7, 8, and 9 is stacked behind 5. Once you get to this position, it turns into this. And I had to like debug for so long just because I couldn't figure out why it was wrong. So it turns into H. 1, space, 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 2, 3, 4, 5. And now you see that here, sorry, you see it's like not adjacent to anything directly. 2. Now 1 is 2 steps away, so up 2 and right 1. So because of this, now you have to move diagonally like this. So the new one turns into H, 1, 2, empty space, empty space, empty space, empty space, 3, 4, 5. So H still hasn't moved, and we're just making sure the rest of the tail is moving correctly. So now H, 1, 2, 3, space, space, 4, 5. So H moved 1, and now each of them has to move diagonally. So now 4 moves over here, and then 5 moves over here, and then you're left with 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, H. And then an empty space is here. So like, like this example, the way this just moved, H1 up, is not specified here. So it was really confusing trying to figure this all out. And then there's like more steps here where it's not like visually shown. So you have to kind of like map it out. I literally have a notepad here. And then I got like my chessboard and like try to put the pawns where it was supposed to be to try to visualize how this was working. And it was so much of a struggle. It was so annoying. But so that was part 1 of why it was annoying. Part 2 was, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the Reddit and see if I can get some help. Just like read through threads. And I realized I was doing something wrong with my attempt. So in my original attempt, I was moving backwards in the snake array. But then, what is happening here? Is this the solution? Let me see. Yeah, so I guess this is my part 2 solution. So I have an array of each movement, direction, and step. For each step, you move the head. So instead of I was having everything at the end just because popping things was easier, but then when I was trying to iterate through the array, for some reason I wasn't iterating through it correctly. And the -1 like the I-1 when trying to do it from like reverse order is kind of confusing. So you move the head, and then I started doing the math, and I Reddit they talk about it's a specific name, Atlassian. I forgot. It's some type of name where like you figure out some movement, and there's a formula that you do X. Like you have two coordinate systems, so you have let's just say 4,1 and 2,2. Then the delta of this, like the change between the coordinates, is the two x's subtraction. The max is essentially x and y subtracted. So 4 minus 2 is 2, comma, and 1 minus 2 is 1. I think you take into consideration negatives in this case. So that's what I figured out from the Reddit. So it's like a hint, I guess. You take the delta x and the delta y. And now, because of the new like way that the rope can move now, it doesn't just move up one, right one, down one, left one, or diagonally one. Now it can move up to 2 to the right. So I think it can move to the example I was using was working with columns, but I think it could also happen to rows where it moves 2 away if you look at the row. So if you move 2 away, that's how you know you have to move diagonally, or that's how you know you got too far away. So that's why I'm checking the absolute value. Because if you take the absolute value of, if you subtract the points and you see that it changed by 2, then that means you have to move diagonally in it. It went too far, I guess. That's how I distinguished between a regular move and a non-regular move, if that makes sense. So then, I set a temp variable, and then I increased the x. If it was less than 0, then that's how you know you're supposed to go to the left based on how I have it here. And then if you went positive, then you go +1, delta y, same thing, -1, +1. And then you insert the last position of the array to the tail locations. This might produce multiple, but that's why I'm using unique here. I got multiple for the first one as well. Now this is a final solution, but man, it took me forever. Just because I was so confused. Like I tried, this is one of the ones I tried. So this was 10. Let me see. So I noticed that the second node, so H, that one always followed H. There's some situations where it doesn't, so that's where I had to rework it because it didn't work. I thought it did, but it didn't. Where I thought H, or the one node worked similarly to the tail node in the first part, where it just went to the last head location. But it does not work. That's why I have like a first step, because I'm saying if it's the first step and each time we're moving, then we're adding it to a head locations array. And then you check the rest of the snake. So you set the head. This is where I was talking about, where I was using it as I was using the reverse array, which was completely, you could have just used slice. Slice always inserts it to the beginning of the array. I think. Yeah, I think so. Check if it's adjacent. If it's not, if it's the last index, add to tail locations. If it's not adjacent, same thing. Head locations. If it's the first one, then you just replace it with the last head location. But as I stated, this doesn't work. Then move the rest of them based on the direction that was set. But this also doesn't work, because if you look at this example, when you move right, I noticed that H moves to the right, but then H and 1 disconnect from 2, and then 2 just starts moving right as well. So, yeah, this did not work. I think, yeah, that's it. I mean, I could run it for y'all. Yeah, 2578. And that is the correct input. I don't think this really is really much of an explanation video just because I was so confusing. And it's more of expressing my frustration with this problem. I was so confused. I think I have a hard time mentally visualizing like the grid and these commands. So I just gave up and started using chess pieces. I haven't looked at 10, but I'll work through it and then I'll upload the video. Yeah, hopefully I have a better explanation for you guys for day 10. So hopefully day 9 was easier for y'all. If it wasn't, let me know so I know I'm not alone. All right. See you guys.